Song for the Imps. How about a song for the Imps? There we go then. Come on, let's get some of the lads together. Let's have a good idea. Okay, yeah, all right. Go on, fellas. Get around the piano. Let's have a good go. Come on, then. You ready? Come on, you lot. Go on, then. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Lincoln City are the team, the Radiance is their name. Stinsel Bank is their home ground and football is their game. So come and cheer them on, you lads, support them all the way. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The Imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our...
Morning all, how are we doing? Wasn't a great weekend, was it, really? We'll see whether it's going to be a great dog walk or not. At the minute, he looks relatively interested, but we'll see how far he gets before he gets bored. Because I'm pretty sure that he'll get bored before I stop talking about Saturday. Now, I noticed a lot of the feedback and a lot of the kind of comments on the back of Saturday were very, very negative. I struggled after one night's sleep, if I was honest, to, well, you're not going to put a positive spin on it, but to shine a little bit of a light on the game and one or two of the things where we went wrong. And kind of, funnily enough, Chris is on. Morning, Chris. I hope you're well, pal. Even Chris has displayed some negativity, and he's even more optimistic than I am. And I'm usually very, very optimistic as well. I think everybody came away from the Burton game feeling massively, massively deflated. And whilst it's easy to look at the run of games, we were talking. Morning, Bubs. Bubs is on as well. Hope you're well, pal. We were talking, I think, on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about games that we'd lost where we thought that we'd actually done relatively well in. And then we're then talking about this losing kind of 6 in 8, if the Orient games counted. If it's not, we've lost 5 in 7. And I think then you look at that 5 in 7 and you think, well, Peterborough away, actually, we had a really good first half. Derby away, it was our kids versus their, or our reserve side as much as possible against their first team. West Ham are European champions. So then you take those 3 out of it, and you're looking at then defeat against Burton Albion, almost in isolation. So it's unfortunate. And I spoke on the podcast, by the way, about falling attendances. 7 under 8,000 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, absolutely. 2 home games in a row under 8,000. The same games got the same crowds last season. Actually, there was 100 more there on Saturday than there was when we played Burton Albion last season, which was in April. We've also got to keep our heads a little bit when you consider that that's only our 3rd home defeat in the league in 18 months. 18 months. And we've lost 3 at home in the league. So it's not something we're used to. A couple of years ago, I remember us losing 3 at home in the space of 10 days, let alone 18 days, let alone 18 months. So I think that that's something else to kind of temper and add to the fire. I also keep coming back to this striker issue. Now, look, there's 30 people watching this. I would 99% guarantee of those 30 that are watching, there isn't one of you that are thinking, why don't we just go and get a striker? But do you know what? It's easy to kind of forget the impact. Now, I had a heated debate with somebody, it's likely to have been my dad, on Saturday about, well, Walker and House hadn't scored before anyway. So, and I think it was Ben on the podcast, actually. Walker and House hadn't scored. So is it that much of an impact? It is an impact because it changes everything that we do. We're having to play Rico, one of the few players who I think has got natural ability from out wide through the centre. We're then having to play, if we're sticking 3-4-3, and I'll come to that in a bit, but we're then having to play Mandroyu and Bishop on the flanks, neither of them offering natural width, which really narrows our attack. And against 6 at the back against Burton, for instance, it was so obvious that was a problem throughout the first half, but we don't have the tools to change it. So I think even I said, and I'm going to argue against myself here, but I think even I said, the lack of striker is a safety net that may be masking other issues, and it may be masking other issues. It may be. but it's also not to be underestimated. It's not to be forgotten because it's always there. Always. It's the permanent Achilles heel. It's like if you've got a broken foot and you're trying to run 5 kilometers every day, for instance, for prostate cancer, as I've been doing, haven't got a broken foot, you know, and you're struggling for other reasons, you get a cold, you get this, you get that, you've still got the broken foot. It's still going to impact everything you do. So at the moment, we're not getting a reflection of the Lincoln City that we had at the beginning of the season. The crazy thing is I can argue both points, by the way, because I can argue that some of the results at the beginning of the season actually made us look better than we were. It was 2 penalties, for instance, against Blackpool. I think we only had 4 touches in the box in the Blackpool game and won 3-0. So it's, you know, results can say something. I do think there's an element of us not being able to attack quite as positively as we would like at times. But you've got to look at that striker situation. It's not just a case of one player. Somebody said that, you know, we're only missing a striker. The other 10 should be able to do the job, but it's not that. It's about the entire balance of the side. And that entire balance changes as soon as you take out one number 9. And to say it's gone on too long now for the number 9, that exasperates me, if I'm honest, because there is not a thing we can do. We've gone through, I went through the free agents list on Transfer Market. I'm sure that the club haven't gone, we'll be all right, and sat on their hands. They will have looked at potential outcomes, potential players that we could bring in and play number 9. But they're really not there. The only player that you look and think, well, he could play there is Connor Wickham. But what's he going to want? To be our biggest earner for a 2-year contract, a year contract? It's a commitment that the club can't make when actually Walker's probably due back at some point in November. Jack Vale is on the grass and training now. So we always knew we were going to have to make do. And now that things have started to go belly up, that kind of realization, that acceptance has almost been overlooked a little bit. Particularly, dare I say, I don't think those pheasants like my live show, particularly by me. Particularly by me, you've gone, well, we are lacking the striker, and yes, we should be better in key areas, by the way. But it does just affect the whole way, I think, that we approach the game. Now, when I look at the Saturday, I try and find the isolated issue. So I'm not going to look at Saturday and say, well, there is an attitude problem in the camp. There's this in the camp. There's that in the camp. Mark Kennedy's under pressure. I'm going to take Saturday as the standalone game. I've done it a little bit, I think, on the podcast. I've done it a little bit, I think, in articles. If you take Saturday as a standalone game, it was always, pardon my French, it was always going to be shit. Because Burton were always going to come to Sincilbank and want to defend. I didn't realise they were going to do it quite as they did with I mean, there was a literal bank of 6, a literal line of 6, and 2 in front of that, so that they almost had sort of 2 defensive midfielders playing at one point with 6 at the back. It was just, you know, they were determined not to get beat. The issue we had was that we had 2 luxury players on the pitch. Now, I remember name drop chatting to Danny Cowley once, who said you can have one maverick in the team. You can have one player who needs more sort of special treatment in the team. You can have one luxury player starting a game. That was always kind of his rule. And I think for a while it was Billy Knott was the project player. Ollie Palmer, I think, was the player who might be a little bit disruptive at times. You can always have one. But on Saturday, and I'm not talking about disruption here, I'm talking about luxury players. We had 2 luxury players on the field. The thinking was probably, well, they're both capable of a moment of brilliance. They may be the ones that are more likely to unlock the defence, rather than a Shadipo or a Duffy who are going to be one-on-one dribbling when you're getting past someone. By the time we got past the Burton defender, if we got anywhere, you were already at the byline. They were so deep that by the time you were to get in behind, you'd be stood on at the train station waiting for a train. That's how kind of deep they were. That's how far you had to go to get in behind. So we played Bishop and Mandroyu. Now look, I'm not going in on Danny Mandroyu 2-footed like he did on the Burton player. It's not fair. I don't. The headline in the Football League paper won't have done Danny Mandroyu any good at all. He's going to be smarting right now. Who knows? It might be the making of him. But in the single standalone game, having the two of those on the pitch at the same time, it just didn't work. It just didn't work at all. And arguably, some people might think that 3-5-2 would have been a better option, but whether it would or not, I don't know, because with two up front, you're trying to force everything through into the middle. But it might have just occupied Burton a little bit more, might have given them a little bit more to think about. The fact is, had we not scored the own goal for them, they were never going to score. Apart from Kwande Bar, what a player, by the way, he is. But apart from him, I don't think they ever looked like scoring at all. And I think had we got to 75 minutes, they would probably have brought Stockton on and started lumping it long to him. And if we'd still got our three at the back, it just should have been 0-0. It just should have been 0-0. And I know there's the individual errors, two of them, a podcaster or a live show don't have any fear in calling somebody out. It was Danny Mandroya's tackle and then Jack Borras' touch at the front of the front post. But that, for me, is the game in a nutshell. And what people have now done, me included, is linked that together with other recent games and gone, we have a problem. And I'm not calling Ben out here, but Ben on the podcast started talking about the problem we have scoring goals. We won our last home game 2-0. It's the first time we haven't scored in a home game this season. We scored away at Portsmouth without a striker. So we even put the ball in the net, by the way, against West Ham. Okay, it was offside. I don't think we've had a particular problem scoring goals. And it's easy to look at Saturday's game. 6 at the back, poor XG, awful to watch, and go, we have a problem scoring goals because we don't have a striker. Whereas I'm not sure it's the case. I'm not sure that we have a distinct problem scoring goals. I don't think we create enough chances. I buy that. We're very good at stopping teams from winning. We've still got to find a way at winning. I buy that. But we did it against Wickham. We did it against Shrewsbury at the beginning of the season. Fundamentally, it's something that we are able to do, but not at the moment. Why not at the moment? Bring it all the way back round. We don't have a centre forward. And there, you see, it's kind of I'm struggling with it because I do think things may have been done better against Burton from a supporter's point of view, not from a professional's point of view. 40 odd of you watching this now, thank you very much. You're not football managers. I'm not a football manager. I mean, Chris Lamming is if he's still watching at rugby, but we don't see the Lincoln team every day. We don't see those players every day. We don't look at videos of the opposition every day. We look at a league table, what 3 or 4 people have wrote on social media, and form an opinion from that. Some of us go a little bit deeper, but not to the level that the manager does, or the head coach does, or the management team does. There is a trick. They have got to try and find a way to start breaking down some of these teams. I buy that. I get that. And which I've proven, by the way, the myth of attendance is falling. May not become a myth if it continues much more. But I remember the last winter where we didn't win at homes from November the 19th, right? Because I remember it was my birthday against Morecambe. FA Cup tie was who we've got in the FA Cup. That was a league tie, beat them 2-1. But we didn't win from that game till about February at home. Attendances didn't massively fall. Lincoln supporters will moan and will bitch, and there'll be people online who are calling for Mark Kennedy's head, and there are people online who are calling for the heads of the people who call for Mark Kennedy's heads. But we'll still be there. Still be there a week on Tuesday against Charlton. 15 or 20, 30, 40 might choose not to go. But then they'll be there against Oxford again if you get a draw. Or if the things are right. The attendances will fall if you start losing games regularly. So if we lose against Charlton, lose against Oxford, then attendances may fall. But even when that was happening, when we were losing every week at home under Michael Appleton, and I remember Gav, my mate behind me, saying, I'm sick of watching Lincoln lose at home. We all were, but people still kept coming. They still kept watching Lincoln City because that's what we'll do. It really is. One thing I found really interesting, by the way, and there's a pattern that's emerged over the last 3 years that has surprised me, but I do wonder if there's something in it. And it's to do with players starting the season well. 3 seasons ago now, so Michael Appleton's final season, Anthony Scully started the season on fire. Do you remember there was the hat trick against Man United? There was goals and assists against Cambridge United. He was Player of the Month on our website. He was nominated or got Player of the Month, PFA Player of the Month on with nationally. Everybody was raving about him. And then mid-September came and that was it, gone, dropped off. Injuries, struggling to get in and out the side. People were talking about how he was going to be sold, all that sort of stuff, just tailed off. Because you were thinking, if he does that all season, he's going to be 20 goals, 20 assists. We're going to smash it. Last season, Ted Bishop, remember? The double against Fleetwood, the behave Teddy Bishop in the cup against Doncaster or Barnsley, one of the two. Smashed it out the park. Picked up the injury. Couldn't ever really reach those heights again through the course of the season. Now we've got Danny Mandroiu. Think about the game against Wickham with the goal and the assist and the second assist. I seem to think something along those lines. And he was outstanding. Everybody raving about him. He's going to be the next big thing. And then there's the injury. He comes off against Shrewsbury. He's had to have the injection. And where are we with him now? All of a sudden, he's got an issue. He's at a crossroads in his career. We're not barely even a month on from where we were lauding him as he's our key player. I wrote an article, I seem to think, saying that he could be the big breakthrough star this season. Watch out, Stephen Kenny's Island and all that sort of thing. Genuinely thought that was going to be something that, he could be troubling the international scene. And here we are 6 weeks on, just 6 weeks. That's not a long time. And you've got headlines with blasting Danny Mandroiu and fans queuing up saying he's got an attitude issue. A narrative that's absolutely been fed into by the post-match interview, by the way, rightly or wrongly. That might be by design. Charlie, come on, we're going back, mate. That might be by design. August, Lincoln City players smashing it. By October, Lincoln City struggling. 3 years in a row. You could even argue that he goes back to the season before, where James Jones was the first name on the team sheet, ahead of Conor McGrandles, and in some instances, in some people's minds, ahead of Liam Bridcut. James Jones. And then what happened? Disappeared. Odd little pattern. Maybe it happens at every club, and maybe you just don't always notice it when it's not your club. Maybe it's something that does happen much more regularly than you give it credit for. I don't know. Thought that's worth looking at. Look, everybody's a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to go through some comments in a minute. So everybody's a little bit uncomfortable at the moment. But Sheffield United away isn't all that long ago. West Ham at home, when we came away and we were praising Lincoln City for a stoic performance. We did what we do well against West Ham. We really did. And people were proud. I was proud. Charlie, we're going back, mate. Come on. Bye-bye then. I was proud. And that was certainly not an emotion that I felt walking away from the ground on Saturday. First home league defeat of the season. Third home league defeat in 18 months. Only the second home league defeat in 18 months against different teams. I think one was Peterborough and one was Burton. Ironic how Peterborough and Burton have then beat us twice in a week as well. It's almost like they're the two bogey teams. Our two bogey teams. There's a lot riding on next Saturday. And I never like to say that about games, about managers, about anything at all. We're 7 points off the bottom four at the moment. And I think we're 5 points, 6 points potentially off the top six. So statistically, we're still closer to promotion than relegation. 11, 12 games in. But yeah, you got another 8 or 9 games yet before you start becoming defined as a struggler or a promotion candidate. Fleetwood away next week. It's a big game because they're the team that are fourth from bottom. They win, then the difference is suddenly 3 points between us and them. And okay, they may leapfrog a couple of teams, but then we're being pulled into that bottom 6 or 7. And then it becomes a thing. And when it becomes a thing, you start thinking, well, we recruited well in the summer. Tyler Walker, Ethan Hamilton, paid money for Ethan Arahan in January. We made Rico Hackett purchase. We spent some money. The team We're backed. The squad was built. We've got a good squad. We have, in my opinion, got a top 10 squad when everyone's fit. But even without strikers, Jack Vale may be back in. Let's not heap pressure hugely on Jack Vale, but we may see him certainly on the grass. Whether he'll be ready, he might be on the bench next week. But there's no, there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on him. And if he doesn't score a hat trick in his first game, there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, that's plan C out the window, etc. So it could be really unfair to put too much on Jack Vale. But let's assume in 6 days' time, we haven't beaten Fleetwood. Then this is a different conversation, because then you start looking and going, well, we can talk about how well we did away at Portsmouth and against West Ham, and how well we did against Derby for the youth team. We can talk about the first half against Peterborough. But then in my mind, we've then got, well, the Leyton Orient game, which was poor. Whether that goes ahead, whether that stands, nobody knows. But the Leyton Orient game is then that performance. The second half against Peterborough, which was woeful. The Burton game, where we struggled to break them down. There's only so long before you can take each game in isolation before you go, actually, this is now an issue. What can we do to kind of get past this? And it just brings it all the way back round. We get striker back. But then when we get a striker back, do we then go, well, Tyler Walker comes back, let's say at the end of November, but then he needs a month to get match fit, then you December, January. Do you see where I'm going with this then? Is it the safety net for the whole season? I don't know. I just think it's right now, it was a tough weekend, and there's a lot of negativity flying around, an awful lot of negativity. And I just think you take stock of where we are. Don't think where we were. Don't think where we were 3 or 4 weeks ago when we were briefly top during a game. Don't think where we were 7 or 8 years ago where we were going away to Welling. Think where we are right now. 7 points outside the relegation zone. 5 points away from we're a mid-table team right now, a mid-table team. It just pays, me included, just for a little bit of calm. We all have our opinions, I think, on the team morale. Everybody's got an opinion on the head coach. I think Fleetwood, like I've just said, I think it's just a big, big game. Go there, get something from Fleetwood, even if it's a battling 1-0 win like we got against Shrewsbury. Some more points on the board, and you just begin to think, maybe then Jack Vale's going to start coming back. Maybe we can then be looking and going, well, we've got a bit of a run where at home we are hard to beat. Burton didn't beat us on Saturday. We beat ourselves. We gave Burton a win, going down to 10 men, scoring the own goal. Burton didn't do there was no physical action from Burton apart from delivering a corner to the near post that won them the game. No disrespect to them, they were bang average. Bang average. Burton Albion will finish 15th or 16th this season because they know what to do not to get beat, but I'm not convinced they know what to do to go and win games. So then come to Lincoln City and shut up shop. When we go to their place, unless we gift them the game like we did when we went to their place last year, which was absolutely woeful from us. If you don't gift them the game, you're going to get a point, and it's going to be bland. If you're thinking of going to Burton Albion later in the season, honestly, I'd think about doing something else that Saturday, because you know what type of game it's going to be. Look, let's go through some comments because I'm on my way back now, and I know that this is an emotive subject. So Jason Wright says, wouldn't mind seeing Lass playing right in a 3 and Ioma right back. Might give us a bit more spark in the final third. Yeah, I think Lass was one of the few kind of bright sparks on Saturday. The result and what happened on the pitch kind of overshadowed the fact that, he came into the team and it disproved the whole he wasn't mentioned in the press conference thing. Although he was actually mentioned, they asked about him and he said he probably wouldn't make it and he'd been with the physios. So it was actually mentioned about Lass. I still say if you don't mention a player in the press conference, it's likely that he doesn't appear, but I might be wrong. But yeah, I thought Lass was a bright spark. I get that. I think that there was once or twice where him and Burrows were linking up. I like it when Rico's on that side. I think him and Rico link up well. I remember him doing it well at Boston, National League North side friendly. I get that. I think that there is a relationship and a kind of a spark between those two that could work a little bit for us. And we've got to be a little bit wider, particularly against, that kind of bank of 6. You've got to try and stretch it a little bit and try and just find little gaps in between. Otherwise, it's always going to be tough to get through. Always. Morning, Connor. I hope you're well. I'm going to just dip through some of the mornings. Sean, morning to you, mate. Adam Butler, it was an honest appraisal you wrote. Burton at best looked very average. Thank you. I tried not to write it the night before because it may have been a little bit more cutting, and I didn't want to be that. I try and be balanced. Jason Gill, shame that we can't record Draper. He's having a blast at Walsall. Yeah, it is. It is. What would you say about that? Cornell, morning, pal. Hope you're all right. Should Kennedy go for Duffy and Hackett on both wings on Saturday against Fleetwood? There's actually an argument, Cornell, for that to happen. Depends who you would then play through the centre, whether you'd still play a Delican, whether you could play Shadipo and Duffy on the wings and Hackett through the centre. I think we've got to look at trying to stretch the game. And I would hope that Fleetwood will be a little bit more open than the game on Saturday, because they're the home side. So the onus is on them to put on a show. I always think if you're the home side, the onus is almost always 70% of the 80% of the time for you to put on a show, you to beat the team that are in front of you. And the away team come with a plan to win the game. But if the away team take a draw, you always go, it's a tidy point at Fleetwood, it's a tidy point at Lincoln, it's a tidy point here and there. Whereas if you're the home team and you draw, you kind of, and there are other circumstances. If it's Cheltenham, Portsmouth, for instance, it's a bit different. But if you're the home team, the home fans want to see you go for it. So Fleetwood could be a slightly different game. Connor, refreshing to hear a grounded view on getting fed up seeing doom and gloom merchants calling for the gaffer's head is ridiculous. Knee-jerk reactions in terms of sackings are not what we do. We haven't sacked a manager since Gary Simpson, which was, I think, 2015. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. I'm pretty sure it was around November 2015. So it's been 8 years since Lincoln City have sacked a manager. Curiously, I seem to think that Clive Nates came on board in December 2015. So make of that what you will. I'm not sure there will be knee-jerk reactions. And look, people are well within their rights to call for the manager's head if that's their belief. I'm not an opinion police, as somebody said. Hope you're still watching, Jimmy. I'm not an opinion police. People are entitled to an opinion. They are. And some people will express an opinion to get rid of the manager very, very quickly. I mean, I remember one guy, not Jimmy this time, if you are watching, not you, mate. We'd beaten, I seem to think did we beat Bristol City and then lose to Chippenham, or vice versa, or but it was 1 minute Mark Kennedy was everything brilliant, and then literally a week later, he's got to go now. That sort of opinion. Yeah, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Like arseholes, we've all got one, and 90% of the time, nobody really wants to see it, but there we go. Molly Wallhead, morning, Molly. Twitchy, getting a bit twitchy. Confident we'll bounce back as we have the players capable. Injuries seem ever-present issues, and petulant actions are not helping our cause. I'm not going to defend the tackle. I'm not going to defend Danny Mandroyo at Peterborough last week. He's had a nightmare few days, 8 days or so. Coming back from injury, clearly frustrated. Really talented boy. Look, I've met Danny. I was lucky to meet him at a sponsors event. He does seem like a nice guy. I met Chris Maguire and I knew that he was a knob from the second he opened his mouth. You don't get that with Danny. It's it's not the same. I haven't seen those two mentioned together at all, but there is, that's the first time that anyone's done it. And they are light years apart, in my opinion, in terms of their attitude off the field. We've just got to harness him on the field. I really, really hope that supporters, when Danny Mandroyo comes back from his ban, are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and are willing to back him, because there was a lot of anger around him after this game. And it's not unlike, and people will laugh at me for this, it's not unlike Beckham in '98 with the petulant kick, and it was a national thing rather than a local thing. People hung effigies of him and Beckham was everything bad, and look what happened when he came back. You had to give him a little bit of time, but there's still a player in Danny Mandroyo, and still a player I think is massive for Lincoln City. Morning, Dave. Hope you're well, pal. Matthew Walker, the striker issue obviously has an effect, but it hasn't changed on negative play that's been there since the beginning of this season and half of last season. I thought last 10 games of last year, we showed real progress in style of play, but this year we seem to have gone backwards with a better squad when it was all fit, and while winning, we kind of gloss over it. We lose highlights how negative we are and how poor it is to watch. Nobody was complaining when we beat Wickham 3-0. To be fair, Matthew, were they? There was no complaints. And I've highlighted that we weren't a massive attacking force against Blackpool, but again, there wasn't that many complaints then. A lot of the negative play has come about from not having a striker, and it does all go hand in hand. And I don't like saying it because it's a safety net, it's a reason, it's not an excuse, etc., but it is a massive reason. It really is, and I think it does contribute to the negative play. We've only seen Lincoln City at home with a House or a Walker in twice, haven't we, this season? We've won 3-0 in both, because I think Carlisle, if I remember correctly, Was that not the game where Hacks came on? So we didn't have a striker. We've only had 2 home games with that now. And when we were away at Notts County, we were pretty attacking there. And when we were away at Shrewsbury, it was tough game to try and break teams down. But we made the change, and then we were attacking in the last 10, 15, 20 minutes. And that's what you do away, isn't it? You go, you're tight, you defend well, you don't concede early doors, and then you try and make the changes if you've got the legs from the bench. So I don't think that this is a revert to what people perceive to be the negative tactics of last winter. I really don't. I do think that it is led by personnel much more than it is a choice. But our attacking stats are not impressive, and they were not as impressive before the injuries as they could be. But I don't think there's a huge difference between our attacking numbers at the end of last season and this season. And let's not forget, I think it was our penultimate home game last season. Ben, if you're watching, that means second to last. That was Burton at home, where we lost 1-0. And it was exactly the same type of game as the one that we've just watched. So if we're looking at the end of last season saying we were better then, actually, it's almost identical, except back then we had a striker. Mexico imp, how we doing, pal? Neither House nor Walker have scored goals this season, but having them on the field gives wingers and midfielders some balance to score. It does. They hold the play up. They bring people in. We'd have been more effective in the centre. House is more likely to win a header. He's not the tallest. Yeah, I agree. Walter, it worried me seeing some players driving off immediately after the game. No debrief, no discussions with the management team, no warm down. I haven't seen this before. No, I haven't seen that. I didn't see that. I can't comment on that. But you would imagine that there should have been a warm down or a dressing down. Probably a dressing down, one of the two. Shane, hope you are, mate. I like Kennedy, but I do worry about his recent interviews. Also talking about being in the sack business. Maybe it's just a man under pressure. Though I doubt the club will be that knee jerk, or at least I hope not. It's almost like I've written that myself, because there's a couple of the interviews recently where I've gone, ooh, I'm not so sure about that. And it feels like he may be feeling the pressure. But I would suspect that that's pressure he's maybe putting on himself. I don't know if the board will be putting him under pressure, or if he feels that there are issues in the dressing room and not having one or two of the players around he's getting a little bit out of hand, a little bit not out of hand, becoming an issue. I don't know. Did notice the way he started the live interview on Tuesday night against Michael Horton, where Michael came on and said, "A win, Mark." And Mark said something along the lines of, "Yes, why do you sound surprised?" And they cut that from the Hope and Glory podcast, and they cut it from the club's official feed live on the radio. That was the case. It just felt like maybe Mark might be feeling it a little bit. And again, I think a manager under pressure makes different decisions to a manager who's not feeling it. So I sincerely hope not, as well. As Shane said, I sincerely hope not. Craig Green says this, and we'll get a lot of stick for it. We play well against top teams, then go shit against teams we should beat. We didn't play. I mean, the problem, Craig, I think, is that's not entirely true now, because we haven't been playing well against the top teams. We lost 3-0 to Bolton, 2-0 to Peterborough. We're losing against the bigger teams now as well. James Christopher, don't know if you're still on, mate, or not, but Kennedy seems to think the Orient game will be replayed. He said with 2 games in hand. I think so as well. Craig, I don't know if people can read that difference between the bad patch last season and this, is that last season we at least had a go, showed commitment. The players looked like they wanted it. The only one you could say that about recently is last. The more recent fans aren't going to keep watching. Lazy, petulant players that at best are getting really boring point at most. Here's a scenario. Could our gaffer be the architect of our new gaffer's demise next Tuesday? I'd disagree a little bit with that. I mean, I don't think Ethan Hamilton's ever looked like he's going through the motions. I don't think Paddy O'Connor's ever looked like he's going through the motions at all. So I do disagree with that a little bit. I think lazy, petulant players is referring potentially to Mandroyu, but I'd like to know who else. I certainly wouldn't call Ethan O'Rahan lazy, even if there seemed to be a bit of petulance when he left the field. So, I think it's easy to go lazy, petulant players, paint the brush over everybody, whereas you could definitely label that to Mandroyu on Saturday without a doubt. But nobody was calling him lazy and petulant when he was, conducting the show when we beat Wycombe 3-0. So I absolutely get your point on board. I definitely don't buy the more recent fans aren't going to keep coming to watch that, because last season, I actually think there were times last season where we looked like we did on Saturday for 4, 5, 6 games in a row. And I'm talking through in the league, December and January, when we were, we went to Charlton. Mandroyu was scoring, by the way, and we're beaten easily. And We lost to Burton Albion, and we struggled at home. I think we lost to Bolton, didn't we? Had men sent off, and it was tough. Lose to Ipswich as well. It was a tough time. And I'm not sure we were always having a go. I don't think there was a lot of difference to Saturday to that period, if I'm entirely honest. Andrew Grace is shocked about the stats I saw at the weekend, bottom 4 on most, really worrying, and would love to hear the manager's thoughts and yours. Well, I kind of put my my thoughts out there about those stats. I use stats to argue my point a lot of the time. I can't then ignore the stats when they argue somebody else's point. To take a quote from the Three Lions song, we're not creative enough, we're not positive enough, and I think that is shown in the stats, but whether that's a reflection of not having strikers or not, it's hard to say. It is hard to say. I'd like to strip those stats back to just before the Bristol Rovers game when we lost the players, because Sheffield United, we all came away and we felt this could be our season because we looked good, we had hard working forwards, we didn't get into their area a lot. Before that, Wickham, Blackpool at home, big wins. Okay, we lost to Bolton, but we went to Shrewsbury and won. We started well in terms of results, and it would be interesting to see how that had panned out had we not had the injuries. Next gen base, which is Ben. Some people say there's no way back for DM after Saturday. It's ridiculous. Don't even think it's a redemption story. He's got sent off. I mean, I'm working on an article at the moment about Jason Lee, because I listened to the podcast, the Under the Cosh podcast of the week with Jason Lee, and it kind of made me rethink Jason Lee's time at Lincoln, and I want to go back through the newspapers and pick up some goals. The number of times he was sent off, I mean, he went in, he knocked a player out, a Crew player called Darren Carr, he knocked him out, spark out in the dressing room after a fight on the field, but there was always a way back for him. To say there's no way back is the sort of hyperbole that football Twitter deals in these days. Of course there's a way back. Ben Hutchinson called us the worst fans in the world. 3 weeks later, he scored against Barnet or Hereford, and I was stood calling his name like a fucking hypocrite, because that's what all football fans are. We're hypocrites. We're either so stubborn that we form an opinion and never, ever, ever change it. That's one type of football fan. Or we're hypocrites and we react to what happens on the field. So the Kennedy out group, who, and there are a few, and a couple watching, I'm sure, on here, will argue the point, we're boring, we're not creative enough, and they'll go back to Blackpool and they'll say 4 touches in the box, 3-0, false position. Perfectly reasonable opinion. And we might win 3-0 at Fleetwood, but they will still have that opinion. Kennedy out, fair enough. Do you know what? If you have an opinion and you're not going to change it, that's your opinion, fair enough. And then there are hypocrites like me that will say, player like Ben Hutchinson, I'll call Ben Hutchinson everything. I remember telling my dad Ben Hutchinson's a knob, and then he scored and I was cheering, and I remember my dad telling to me, he said, what the fuck are you cheering him for? Stacey West end of the ground. I remember it so well. It's just like we scored for Lincoln, isn't he? And now I dislike him again. So of course there's a way back. 100%. Ben Harrison thinks last season Kennedy had a pass. This season he has nowhere to hide. He's finding out that rarely do League 1 and 2 players have 2 good games in a row. Fair point. If, again, I do disagree with that. I think Ethan Hamilton has had good games in a row. I don't think Paddy O'Connor's been bad. I don't think defensively we were bad at all, apart from one corner, one set piece, and that's one person. I thought defensively we were solid enough. I don't think Ethan Arahn had a bad game. I certainly think Ethan Hamilton played well. It's just that front three just didn't function. I don't even think Rico Hackett played that badly on Saturday. I don't think we played badly on Saturday. I just don't think we played at times. I just thought in the way we dealt with the opposition, the way that we managed the game, I thought we were fine. I thought first half, I never felt we were in any trouble. It was just like watching Magnolia paint dry at times, but then that was partly because of our Burton setup. I don't think we were that bad, and I know that I haven't seen the ratings on the site, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of the ratings on the site will be atrocious. It'll be 3s and 4s. It's not really a reflection of how those players played, if I'm honest. I think we misplaced fewer passes in this game than we did away at Shrewsbury that we won, or we did at home to Carlisle. So I don't think we were actually that bad. Lee Thorpe was sent off 2 games running, I'm sure. He was, Shane, I remember that. Seemed to think one of them was Cheltenham. It was when you didn't used to get your suspension until a week or 2 after. And I remember the second sending off that night I was out in Ritz's, absolutely battered. And I remember going up, there There was a couple of ways into Ritz's, and I was going up like the main front staircase going up to Ritz's, and he was coming down, and he recognised me. To be fair, Lee was one of the few people at the time who recognised me as Poacher, because I'd never used to interact with the players or anything like that. And just crossing the road. Come on, boy, let's go quickly. And I remember him looking at me and going, "Oh, you're right, mate." And I went, "Bloody hell, Lee." I said to Charlie, "Go now, quickly." I remember like 2 red cards in a row. He's like, "Yeah, I'll get a couple of weeks off for that, won't I?" And he was kind of chuckling about it. And that was the way he was. He was combative. But I think that was his red cards were never the petulant, stupid red cards. They were always part of a wider fight with a player. Whereas, Danny Mandroyu didn't have that. It was a pointless tackle in the middle of nowhere. So, right, that's me just about done. That's all the comments done. I hope you've enjoyed the dog walk. I haven't been able to get quite as many of them on in recent weeks, just with work and haven't been well and just had an awful lot to do. So I will try and get some more on for you over the course of the next few weeks. Hopefully, in 7 days' time, I can be talking about how we've put 4 past Fleetwood and how Jack Vale is the saviour of all things Lincoln City. But until then, just have your opinions. Express your opinions. Absolutely not the opinion place, Jimmy. Wherever I saw you give me a little wave, give you a wave back. Absolutely not. Everybody's entitled to it. That's what fuels football. Where would I be? Where would the podcast be if we didn't have counter arguments to things that we'd seen online? We would absolutely struggle for it, wouldn't we? Sam Hart just bought my Stevenage ticket. Me too. Yep. Can't wait. Can't wait. Be another good day ruined by football. Andy's bus, hopefully Jimmy will be on there, a few other people. It'll be great. Good day out, because that's what football's about. Different opinions, but everybody staying friends. No point in falling out about anything at all, is there? So, Matty Strawson, last of all, morning from Cape Verde. Cape Verde might be warmer. It seems a million miles away. August seems a million miles away. Good win against Fleetwood, and we'll all be getting back together. I'll see you there, Jimmy. Up the imps.